schedule here, and I got a feeling a lot of you didn't come here just to hear me as we go on as well. My thanks to Multimin for sponsoring my trip out here, and also the other sponsors at the back of the row, and I think my challenge is to give you 1 or 2 ideas to go home with today. And so really, I think this is key. A little more fun milking cows 2014 than 2015. The whole question about profit potential. And the question is, where is this thing all going to shake out? And I thought your panel earlier this morning had some really neat comments as well. Now, if you could see that, you can see I'm retired. You can print your own money in Illinois. So you can see I'm printing money. Maybe you can do that in New York, another big Democratic state. It's always great to come to a blue state. You know, thanks for electing Obama. We appreciated him. We didn't want him back in Illinois. I'm glad. And looks like you've got one of your former senators going to go there too, but we'll move on. Anyway, I can see that's always good to get attention. Well, it's a really changing economy. I'll let you read those. How many remember a $4 protein price a year ago? $4 a pound for protein. Remember that number there? So certainly things are really changing, and you can pick and choose whatever you want there. The one that concerns me is what? That export one. Pretty spooky, isn't it, guys, gals? We're down, according to last I saw, down about 3% from where we back up to 16%. How many think that's going to be a problem? That's going to be a problem. How many have seen the price of butter and cheese in New Zealand? You don't want to go there. You don't want to go there. So anyway, a lot of interesting things. And so why do I kick this off? Are you guys still getting $400 for bull calves? $400 for bull calves? Yeah, I see some heads nodding. So bull calves are really pretty amazing. And cull cows are doing as well. So certainly that's some good news from that aspect there. The real question, though, is, we're going to spend about 35 minutes on feed additives. We're going to do some voting. Get early. Get ready to vote. Feed additives are really going to be in the bubble because why? You can take them out when things get tight. When things get tight, these products are sitting really on the bubble. So certainly everybody's worried about the economy. Certainly if you look here, now you can see there's the White House, and you can see, of course, there are cows on the South Lawn. So even Obama says there's an opportunity here as well. And there, if you could see him better, there he's milking cows on the South Lawn. So you can see there's life after being president. So be ready. I don't know if he'll relocate in New York or where, Illinois, but anyway, there's always opportunities as we look at where this might be going. He doesn't want to come back to Illinois. Or where's our last governor? Anybody know where our last governor is? In jail in Colorado. In jail in Colorado. And the previous governor just got out of jail about 4 months, 6 months ago, and he was a Republican on top of it. So anyway, not a good place to be a politician in Illinois. Well, I'll let you read these definitions, what a feed additive is. Pretty straightforward. It says something that you dairymen, you nutritionists, you veterinarians, put in the ration for a non-nutrient use. So certainly we fall in that category. And here, why would you want to do that? Well, I hope it's not number one, cover up poor management. Number two, I think 10 cents, kind of a magic number for you nutritionists. Once you get a feed additive more than 10 cents a cow a day, it really better deliver. When it's down 2 or 3 cents a day, people say, well, I'm a Democrat, I'll take a chance. I'll take a chance. But really the last point's where you want to go. Feed additive, hopefully, it does something to improve the ration. So let's go down that slippery slope and go from there. This is brand new data. In fact, we just got a week ago. This is Hord's Dairyman Market Survey. So the question is, what are farmers in the U.S. doing? And this comes from Hord's Dairyman Market Survey. These are their readers. And it's weighted for the number of people in the state. So obviously, New York and Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota, big players. Mexico and Florida don't have a big impact on this because they don't have very many dairy farms there. So you can see buffers still remain number one. You can come down through here. This is an interesting number. I look at here sits Rumensin. How many here are feeding Rumensin to dairy cattle? Show of hands. How many are feeding Rumensin? 29%. Now Elanco says that's wrong. Their number says they're close to 50% market utilization of cows. These are farms. They're talking cows. A little bit difference there. But what else does that drive home to you and I? My farmers don't know what they're feeding for feed additives. They don't know what it is. Now, we won't go around, we don't have time, but how many know how many milligrams of Rumensin you're feeding your cows today? How many know how many milligrams you're feeding your cow per day? And I just see only 2 hands going up, maybe 3 hands. You want to volunteer your number? How much? 300? 300, and what's the new magic number, guys? 400. 4 to 450. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's kind of where we're at. So again, not only do you feed Rumensin, but the question, do you have the right number coming into those cows? Here's one that catches my eye. Mycotoxin binders. How many think that could be important this year in New York, in Illinois? Mycotoxin binders with all this wet corn. sitting out here in the fields as far as that goes. So again, mycotoxin, we can do a Q&A on that, but every mycotoxin binder is what? Not equal. And some work very well for aflatoxin. Is your problem going to be aflatoxin? No, it's not going to be aflatoxin. It's going to be the other mycotoxins as far as that goes. And a huge issue in Illinois right now, maybe not here in New York, wheat. Anybody here raise wheat? Lots of aflatoxin, lots of vomitoxin in wheat. How much? As high as 19 parts per million. So if you're going to mess around with some of this wheat that may have some damage because of the growing conditions, eyes wide open, eyes wide open. And you can come down through the rest of these at your leisure, but this is kind of on the list. So the question is, how many of these do you use? And then the question is, do you need them? Do you need them? So we're going to go through a couple things very, very quickly. Well, some of you are going to say, Hutjens, move on. This we're going to cover in the next 30 minutes. We're going to watch our watch because we have another program coming in here at 1:30. So we call these the 4 R's. So if you're a dairy farmer, nutritionist, veterinarian, consultant, you've got to answer this every day. And by the 4 R's, we're simply saying, why did you put it in? What are you expecting your cows, your heifers, your calves to do out there on the farm when you put that product in? The second R simply says, can you make a buck? Can you make some money on it? Now, if you're a Republican, you're going to be like me, 2 to 1. If you're a Democrat, you can lose money. What the heck? Who cares? Just lose money. I like 2 to 1, which means what? If I'm putting in 6 cents worth of bicarb, or Larry, 30 cents worth of potassium carbonate, am I going to get her back twofold? I want it back twofold. Because some of my cows in Illinois don't understand the research. In other words, they don't all respond. And then we have what we call non-economic returns. Meaning what? Well, I got a feed additive in that reduces lameness. Well, do you sell hooves every day? Probably don't sell hooves. Eventually, though, you will get it back. But that's the neat thing. Many of these additives have effect on what? Milk component or milk yield. And away we go. And this simply shows a very simple slide, because I knew Dr. Jones was going to be here. I didn't want to confuse him. He's in the economics. It simply says, if I've got $17 milk, and that's the word I hear in New York, 17. We're about 16 you saw on my slide. What's the bad news? If you're the average Illinois dairyman, I need what? 18. If you're the average dairyman in Illinois, you need 18, and we're sitting right around 16.50. So it means what? Great hobby. Great hobby. Don't have to go to the exercise club. Don't have to pay that dues, because you get all you get to what you do milking cows. But you can see if I got bicarb yeast culture, they're going to be in that 6 cent range. I've got to get at least 4/10 of a pound milk or milk equivalent energy corrected milk to break even on that. So it means I got to get almost 8/10. If I use bicarb, we're giving away prizes. I'll give away another sandwich, in fact. What's the return on bicarb? How many pounds of milk should I get bicarb if your cows understand the research? How many pounds should they respond? 3.3. Is that a good benefit to cost ratio? If I'm investing 6 cents, that's a real deal. That's the real deal, no question. And that's why a lot of farmers are feeding bicarb. How many think some of those farmers don't need to feed bicarb? Raise your hand. There's a lot of herds in Illinois, New York, and U.S. don't have to feed bicarb. We can argue that a bit later if you wish. Next is, what's the research looking like? Then the 4th R simply says, and by the way, these are all different kinds of research. This is when you go to McDonald's. That's where everybody drinks coffee in Illinois now, is McDonald's. There's no other restaurants available in these small towns anymore. Everybody drinks coffee at McDonald's. And so the question is, where are you on this research area? And as you get up here, that's the good stuff. That's the stuff that comes from Cornell. And it's probably going to cost $40,000 if they're like Illinois. That research is pretty pricey. So you need to have some of that research coming out there as well. A lot of you in the future are going to do what? That research is going to be done in your herds. Because in Illinois, we're going to lose our dairy herd. I don't think there's any question about it. We're going to lose our herd. Looks like you guys are building a new one in Cornell, new dairy farm. But most of those farms are doing what? Losing money. And so deans look at that pretty carefully. And then the last R is awfully important to you guys and gals. Why? Did the research work on your farm? That's the bottom line. I don't care what Cornell, University of Illinois says. If this product, this technology, this amino acid, this fatty acid, this feed additive, if it works in Cornell, good for you. But the bottom line is what? It better work on your farm. So how are you going to measure that? And should you do that before you go in? And the answer is, you better believe it. You better say, I'm going to be able to look at something, Dairy Comp 305, or whatever the case is, to determine where I'm at. Now, Here's your homework assignment. Write this down. This will be your test. If you're going to say, I'm going to use product Z, look at these two things. Variation. How many heard of type 1, type 2 tests? How many have seen type 1, type 2 tests? A couple hands going up. How many have seen meta-analysis? You want to ask that question. You want to ask that question. What's a type 1, type 2 error? Well, very simply, a type 1 error says, I fed bicarb and my cows couldn't figure it out. They didn't respond. That's an error. And there's what associated with that? A cost. Then you can be like me. Anybody Dutch besides me here? Any Dutchmen here? Dutchmen are tighter than a church mouse. Man, they won't spend a penny, and if they got a penny, they'll squeeze it twice, trying to get two out of it. Anyway, I am not going to feed bicarb, but it would have reworked on my herd. That's another error. So a type 1, type 2 error simply looks at all the data, and here's all the information you're going to look at. And here's the research results. So you put that through a computer program, and Dr. Jones, you're right in your bailiwick now. This is your baby to do. And you're going to get a response curve. And again, you can see that wonderful red response curve that only I can see. Can you see that red curve? Very good. Notice it comes out right here at 3.3 pounds. What's the good news? You're hoping you're where? Over here someplace. The bad news, some of you in the room are over here, which means you get a 0. And some of these feed additives not only give you a 0, they do what? You lose some milk. You lose some milk. So eyes wide open. And so these are the numbers they use, the research studies, the bicarb levels. By the way, those of you, how many here, who's feeding bicarb? Okay, write that number down. Are you feeding that amount? 0.7% of the total ration dry matter. That's where you have to be. So if you're feeding the same amount of bicarb today as you did 10 years ago, you're a Dutchman. Because your cows are doing what now? They didn't do 10 years ago. They're eating more feed. You're getting more milk. You get more dry matter in. Same thing applies to some of these other feed additives as well as you go through it. But there's the economics. This is old data, I understand, but that's where the economics go from. And here we go. So hang on to your hats. Okay, and if I push the right button, it'll pop up here. This is a correct answer. I fed bicarb. My cows responded. I did not feed bicarb. My cows would not respond. Here is an incorrect. This is your type 1 error, meaning I fed the bicarb, but my cows did not respond. And we'll get the right buttons here. And this your type 2 error means I didn't feed bicarb and my cows would have responded. Now here comes the bad news. The numbers come in red. That'll teach you guys and gals in the back row. I've got to get a little bit closer here. That's going to cost me about 5 cents a day. Can you see that number?
I can't see the number clearly. No.
Can't see it clearly. Your eyesight's okay? Yeah. Can anybody else see it clearly? Anybody else see it? Trust me, it's 5 cents. That's 0.05. That's a nickel. That's air, type 1 air. This one's going to cost you something even higher. You can't see that one either, can you? No, I think it's around 22 cents, something like that. So now there's the research that says, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And a lot of companies on amino acids, on inert fats, and feed additives, they've got this data. Ask them for them. What's your type 1, type 2 error? This one is roughly 6 to 1, 5 to 1. One of the guys is Dr. Galton from University of Pennsylvania Vet School. He's done a lot of these things. And so my first question to him, what's the right answer? He says, there's no right answer. It is what it is. It is what it is. Let me give you another one here. And this one is going to be, I got to point it towards that. Here comes yeast culture. And again, you're going to have to trust me on this one here. We go quickly. And the first one comes up, and that is going to be 1 cent. Can you see that one? You can see that. Just make believe you can. Okay, that's 1 cent. And down here, you can see it's going to be about 31 cents. Which product has the best type 1, type 2 error relationship? The yeast culture by far, by far, by far. Now, some of the crowd should say, Hutjens, you can't put yeast culture in for a penny a day. And now remember, it's one of these magical statistical analysis that looks at a lot of different variables. So it isn't going to be the cost of the product at all times. So away we go. And I could show you 4 or 5 more. What's the good news? I hid them yesterday, so you aren't going to see them. And the good news is you can't see them anyway. Let's move on. The other one is a meta-analysis. Some of you raise your hand on meta-analysis. What's the beauty of a meta-analysis? Well, they look at all the research and put it together. And it's weighted depending on how many cows, how much variation, statistical design, all those important things. This is Monenzen. Comes out of Canada. Have any Cornellians here? Anybody went to Cornell? Because we need to go slower if you went to Cornell. That's all. I just had to check that out sooner. You kind of have to know your crowd a little bit, you know. And of course, then they have trouble with Canadian data on top of it. But isn't this interesting? It says, look at this, guys and gals. It says up here, we have got 36 papers, 71 trials, nearly 10,000 cows. This big analysis. There's only one product that has more of this. For another sandwich, what is that product that has more research than Rumensin? Sold by the same company. Posilac, exactly right. Posilac will have much, much more numbers there as far as that goes. And so you come down here. Does this make sense to you, dairymen? It simply says a decrease in dry matter intake. Does that make sense to you? Sure it can, because that's one of their claims for feed efficiency. They eat a little bit less feed, especially growing heifers, and what? They grow about the same. And you come down here, it says slightly decrease in butterfat test. Anybody ever see that feeding Rumensin? A little bit lower butterfat test, nothing on protein. Notice a little difference in fatty acid composition of the milk, and that all makes sense as well. So it says if you're going to feed Rumensin, you might see these things happening on your farm, and oh, by the way, you're going to pick up 1.6 pounds more milk. And the cost of Rumensin typically is what? A penny for 100 milligrams. So you cheapskates in the crowd here are spending about 3 cents, maybe 4 cents, and you may get back a pound and a half more milk. You think that's going to pencil on a benefit cost ratio, even the butterfat test? And by the way, if your butterfat test goes down, how many think it is not caused by the Rumensin? Raise your hands. It is not caused by the Rumensin. You got some other funky thing going on out there in that feeding program. Because we have guys in Indiana at 500 plus milligrams with a 4 butterfat test, just hammering. We can argue that a bit later as we move on. And here's another analysis of another paper. Notice the other neat thing, guys and gals. This one says Journal of Dairy Science. What makes that pretty exciting, guys and gals? It means a group looked at the data and said, this is real. We signed off and said this is good research, correctly done, statistically analyzed, not biased, the whole thing. And now here you can see for dry cows. And that's why all of you are feeding Rumensin to your close-up dry cows and fresh cows, because it decreases ketone bodies, reduces NEFAs, and goes with that. What's the big news in Europe? What's the big news in Europe, guys and gals? What did they clear about 6 months ago? You can feed Rumensin in Europe as a controlled capsule under veterinary control. And the reason for that is what? They want to give those capsules to their transition cows because the effects it has on metabolic disorders, the DAs, and animal health. Pretty powerful. You might ask, why don't we feed capsules? So I asked somebody at Atlantico that about 3 years ago, and the answer was, we're not going back to FDA and ask that question. We're just going to leave well enough alone. We're not going to mess with it. We move on. And then they look at different stages of responses, and there's no big surprises there either. You can look at that. Remember, this is all being taped. In fact, these PowerPoints sit on her computer. So if you have any interest in that you really want to see them at home, get a hold of Carolyn, because she can you can have them. You can look at them at your leisure as far as that goes. Now, let's start wrapping up here. Get ready to vote. So now the $64 question is for you dairy managers, for you consultants, nutritionists, veterinarians, which one? Which one? And this slide we could have a problem with, but it's the most important slide I have. Now you look at this. These are your choices out there, guys and gals. It says, I can look, and I borrow this slide from Vita Plus. Some of you recognize that name. It simply says, well, which one? And what's important is these are products that can improve energy balance. And you can come down through the list. I won't read them to you. Can you see them in the back on the green background? Can you read them back there? A couple of you are nodding your heads, yes. A couple of you are falling asleep. We move on. Anyway, energy balance, calcium balance. How many think that one is huge? Let me tell you, you better help your fresh cows on calcium balance. There is no question that is the 100-pound gorilla out there. Immune function. How many think in the future that's going to be the biggie? If I got a feed additive that's going to help the immune function of my cows, look out. I think you're going to really sell it. And they just listed a bunch of products over here. You can see your organic trace minerals popping up here. And rumen enhancers, reproduction improvement, hoof or foot health, protein efficiency, and microtoxin binders. I think I counted them up, and I think there may be some 30 different products listed. And your job as a dairy manager or whatever hat you're wearing today is to figure out which one of these should I be investing in and going with out there in the feeding program. Powerful PowerPoint. Powerful PowerPoint as you go through it. So the question is, why are you adding additive Z, and which one or multiples do they plug in out here in the diet, in the feeding program? So we have a paper that we can get to your group if you want that. Every year we update it slightly, and we take all the additives for dairy cows and break them into 4 categories. Function, how much, the cost in Illinois, benefit to cost ratio based on research. And half of these additives, we don't have that. That's one of the real problems we have. Next is, what's the strategy? You know, when should I use them? Should I use them? Under what conditions? And then status. Thumbs up? Well, let's look at status quickly. And we're going to skip these 2. Here are the status. We'll come back. We broke them down in a recommended. Notice this little word here. Included as needed. That's where the bicarb comes into play. If you take our average Holstein herd in Illinois producing 19,800 pounds of milk, and they get 10, 12, 14 pounds of baled hay, how many think they really need buffer? Big question mark if that herd needs buffer. Then you come down to something we say experimental. It says, boy, it's kind of interesting. Kind of interesting. Some of you will recognize the word Omnigen AF. That's where we have Omnigen AF. We're saying that's an interesting product. We need to see some more research on it before we do what? Recommend it across the board. Experimental evaluative simply means, you know what? Niacin, University of Wisconsin, they could never get it to work. University of Illinois, every one of our studies worked. So there's a great deal of variation on niacin response. We think we know why. Niacin has to be what? Rumen protected. Guess what the bacteria do to your niacin? Tear the crap out of it. They break her down. They break her down. And so we've got these charts here, and this is just yeast culture. So there's your function, your level, your cost, benefit to cost ratio, feeding strategy, and recommendation. Now, every one of you dairymen have this chart someplace in your mind or on your desk or when you make that decision. If you don't, shame on you. Shame on you. So that's out there if you want to take a look at that as well. So, here we go. We're just about done. We're going to be done 5 minutes early. Hopefully you got some questions. Here we go. My name is Hutjens up there. Very Dutch. Your job is what? Put your name up there. Smith, Jones, whatever the case is. The question is, what are you going to have here in decisions and feed additive? So here we go. Get ready to vote. If I was going to work with you, I'm not sure why I don't do that. Here is a 6 that I would recommend you and I have to take a hard look at. We're going to look at rumen buffers. How many are feeding rumen buffers? Show of hands. How many show rumen buffers? Fair number of hands going up here. What about yeast products? Yeast products. A lot of hands going up there, about the same number, give or take as I watch here. Rumensin. How many hands? I gained a few more. Gained a few more there. Sage inoculants. How many are using sage inoculants? Fair number of hands going up there as well. What about biotin? How many are using biotin? Wow, big drop off. Looks like we're down to about 4 or 5 hands. And organic trace minerals. How many are using organic trace minerals? Our hands go back up there. Now, we're not going to specifically talk about biotin, but why am I recommending biotin? Now, I'm Dutch. The research says 4 pounds more milk. Canadian, Wisconsin, the Ohio State, research from there says about 4 pounds more milk. And biotin is going to cost you somewhere in that 7 to 8 cents per cow per day. Wow. I'm thinking about that. And Bill Weiss suggests, and a lot of you recognize the name Bill Weiss, powerful researcher from the Ohio State, it looks like it had to do with energetic transfer. So it's not what? It started out being for what, guys and gals? Who wants another sandwich? What's the first time we used biotin? Everybody talked about doing what? Better hoofs. Better hoofs. Hoof improvement. Based on horse DAP, actually. Better hooves. My answer is I want the milk. And if the hooves get better, hooray for me. That's free. That's free. Now, I'm not sure every one of you have to run and buy a biotin tonight, but the point is, you got to make that decision on your farm out there as well. This year, hopefully, the milk price will not follow 2007 and 8. My 5th best dairyman in Illinois said, Mike, my wife and my baker won't let me buy all 6. I can buy 1. 1. Okay, you voters, here we go. So these are the 6 I'm going to let you vote on. You know, this is not Chicago. You can only vote once. You cannot vote early and often. So only 1 vote. Only 1 vote. Are you ready to vote? How many made out which ones they're going to vote for? Show of hands. How many got their favorite one picked? Okay, all 4 of you. That's really good participation. This is working out really, really well. Really well. I can't see the slide. I'll read it to you. Here we go. How many want to take? Only got 1 vote. Rumen buffers. How many pick rumen buffers as number 1? Well, we got 2 brave souls there. They're wrong, but that's good. How many pick yeast culture? How many pick yeast culture? And I got another 4 souls there as I scan the crowd. How many pick rumensin or monensin? 1 hand, 2 hands, 2 hands, 2 hands, 1 holding up her spoon. I don't think she's voting. Are you voting? You're just eating ice cream. Okay, we had 2 there. Side inoculants. How many pick side inoculants? Looks like I got about 6 or 7 there. Biotin. Obviously, I'm going to get, I got a couple of votes for biotin. Holy smokers, I'm impressed. And what about organic trace minerals? Looks like I got about 3 votes there. Great exercise. Great fun. Great fun. Here we go. Now, this is Hutjens' priority. 2 things to say. Number 1, anytime I can do something in the room, I'm pretty excited. Them little suckers aren't in the labor union in Chicago yet anymore, so they work pretty cheap if you keep them happy. So they work pretty cheap out there on your dairy farm. So anything I can do, and here's my big 3 right there that we had on my list. They all work through the rumen. Then I got these other ones here. Here we go. My first choice is going to be rumensin. My first choice, and we can argue about that in the Q&A period if you want, but that would be my first choice. Rumensin is what, guys and gals? It's an antibiotic that literally selects certain organisms in the rumen. And I defy you, unless you use essential oils, to put something else that's going to do that. You know, I can't feed, I can't do anything. I mean, it is what it is. Number 2 will get me in trouble. I'm coming down here to side inoculants. Side inoculants is my number 2. Why? Because I get about a 3% dry matter recovery and a 2% increase in energy, and you put that in a high-producing cow in New York. I don't know if you have any of those or not, but you put in a good cow, 8-to-1 benefit-to-cost ratio. Now, maybe you can chop your sides right, and get the processing just right, and get the starch just right, and you package just right, and maybe you could work your way out of this one, Larry, but I wish you well. I wish you well. Then number 3, which gets me in all kinds of trouble, my organic trace minerals. I love my organic trace minerals, and I'm coming really at you with immunity. Immunity, amongst other things. So I'm coming there. My number 3 sits down here. And by the way, the one we're adding to that is which one, guys and gals? Chromium. We're adding chromium. Here, who's feeding chromium? Anybody feeding chromium here? Anybody feeding chromium? Well, good things. You came to the meeting. You did do some looking. Now, if you want to, we can show you the data. My host was just so surprised. We're showing you 34 PowerPoints. There's 76 sitting back here. So trust me, if nobody asks a question, you aren't getting out of here early. We'll move on. Then I come number 4, yeast culture. Number 5, buffers. Now, why did I put my buffers number 5? I got to convince 3 of you. Why did I put it 5th? Well, I go to TMR, I adjust my particle size, I get my starch right, I get the rumen working right. What's going to happen? I might be able to save my 6 cents. I still think it's great research, but the point is I might be able to work around that. And then from there, I come down here to my biotin. Every one of you have to be voting this on your farms. Every day. Every day. Close-up dry cows. Here we go, close-up dry cows. Again, it should say Hutjens up there, but it doesn't. I think that's a no-brainer. Yeast product. I think the rumensin data, if you looked at the survey out of Canada, that's a no-brainer. Side inoculants are going to show up all the time. I'm always wanting that benefit. You know, a 3% dry matter recovery, that means 3% fewer acres. That's big. That's always going to be a big thing sitting there. Organic trace minerals and chromium. It looks like the chromium, you want them in your close-up in your fresh cow group especially. Especially at that point there. And then I'm going to go with anionic product, assuming you got lots of potassium sitting in your forages. How many are using anionic products? Well, I see a few hands going up there. There are new ones on the marketplace, aren't there? Animate, soy chlor, biochlor. I call them second generation, meaning they're better than ammonium chloride and ammonium sulfate and calcium chloride and calcium sulfate, at least in my opinion. Those are pretty good alkalizers, but guess what they did to palatability, guys and gals? Down went intake. And the last thing you and I want in a close-up ration is what? Less dry matter intake. And your Tom Overton can tell you 150 reasons why that's bad news. Okay, here comes my fresh cow group. And all of you could make this list as well. And in fact, if we had time, we had great fun with this talk about 6 months ago because I was working with one feed company and they had their 10 nutritionists there. And guess what we did right now? Everybody turned that list in before I got to this part of the presentation. It was pretty interesting because guess what? Same feed company. Were all those lists the same? No, sir. No, ma'am. Lots of differences. So here I come back. Rumen buffers. I didn't have them in my close-up ration. Why did I not have a buffer in my close-up ration, guys and gals? It works against DCAD. So in other words, that's bad news. It goes the wrong way. So you don't want buffer in your close-up group. You might want to check that out, your mineral supplement. Again, my yeast products sit there. Monensin. Calcium supplements. How many are using the boluses? Anybody using the calcium boluses? Are they working well for you? How many think they work well for you on the herd? How many are giving more than one bolus? How many are giving more than one bolus? I think that's another one you want to be thinking about, especially in third and fourth lactation cows. You may discover every 12 hours bolusing them. I know it's going to cost money, but I'm trying to get this cow back on track. So you can bolus, you can drench, you can IV. There's all kinds of pluses and minuses in all those procedures. But if you look at the literature, they're saying a third of your cows are going to be hypocalcemic. I didn't say milk fever, low blood calcium. And what does low blood calcium affect? Smooth muscle. Where's that, guys? Teat ends, uterus, digestive tract. Do you think those are big target organs as far as that goes? My silage inoculants, my biotin, my organic trace minerals, and then rumen-protected choline might fall into there as well. How many here are using rumen-protected choline? Got some hands going up there as well. So certainly it's a fun list to take a look at. Let's wrap up. Let's wrap up. And hopefully the tent won't disappear on me. Okay. The screen's moving too. It's kind of one of those moving presentations. Some people call that a movie. This is called a moving presentation. And it's starting to move even more. Okay, Hutjens as needed list. We may be done here quicker than what you think. Propylene glycol, calcium propionate, great drench products. Great drench products as far as that goes. Niacin, if I was going to feed, who's feeding niacin? Anybody feeding niacin here? And I get to talk even louder. Can you hear me in the back? Only one thing worse than this tent, that's a tin roof. I've been in a place where it's a tin roof. It gets even louder. Anyway, if I was going to feed niacin, I would feed 3 grams rumen protected. And there's 3 or 4 companies making that product. And I'm getting a lot more attendees in my talk. Isn't this exciting? This is really exciting. You just want to get all the rain, I know. Anyway, rumen protected, I have 3 grams rumen protected and 3 grams raw, unprotected. Why am I going to leave some of that raw? Because the research from Purdue in Wisconsin says there's a rumen effect with niacin on rumen microbes. And so I want to double dip it. I want to make sure my rumen microbes get any stimulatory effect there, and then the protective stuff gets it into the bloodstream. And that's going to be on cows that are body condition score 3.5 or higher. Heavy cows have niacin stamped all over it. Stamped all over it. Mycotoxin binders. Depends on the year. We are going to see her this year in Illinois because we're going to have immature and corns and wheat and God only knows cottonseed what's happening there. But these are the products for aflatoxin. These are the products for DON and zearalenone and T2s. Use the right one. Use the right one. Last year we had some farms in Illinois shut off on aflatoxin because They didn't put the fans on the grain quick enough, and the grain in spring got growing. And our co-op has in their contract with one very large supplier, you send us one amount of aflatoxin or denatured or affected milk, and the contract is gone. So they monitor this very, very carefully as well. Protected choline, especially if you tend to have more ketosis. And again, talk to Tom Overton about that one if you wish. Anionic salts, products we already talked about there. I think it really depends on your potassium levels and your blood calciums. A neat paper at the Dairy Science meeting this year. It isn't ready to go yet, but a cow side test for calcium. How many think that could be a real winner? You've got that for ketosis now. You can run blood ketones right at the farm. If I could run blood calciums on the farm, would you and I be excited? I'm not sure you'd be excited, but I'd be excited. I'd be excited out there as well. And then, of course, the acid-based preservatives. We all know about them. Obviously, they're going to really prevent mold and baled hay and high moisture corn and stuff like that. My watch list as I wrap up here. My 40 minutes are gone. Essential oils. A lot of interest in essential oils. What do you mean essential oils? Garlic, garlic oil, pine tree oils. Anyway, they come from Europe. Why do they come from Europe? No Rumensin in Europe. You can't use Rumensin. Randy Shaver says 6 to 10 cents a cow a day, and you're paying how much for Rumensin? 3 or 4 cents? Have you figured it out yet? Pretty straightforward. Now, if you're an organic dairy farmer, and I know you have some in New York, as we have in Illinois, then this becomes very interesting, because it does, again, manipulate the rumen fermentation. So again, be aware there are alternatives out there as well. My problem with essential oils is, once you get over this level, guess what happens? Trouble. Same thing, you feed 900 milligrams of Rumensin. I think you'll get your cows in trouble at really high levels. So be careful, and second of all, which oil? There are about 15 different oils, and I don't know which ones are the right ones. DFM, direct fed microbes. The good guys, the good bacteria, also known as probiotics. Who's feeding them here? Who's feeding them to your calves? Who's feeding them to your calves? If you aren't feeding them to your calves, write that sucker down. I'll almost bet you a piece of pie. And if you look at me, I don't lose many pie bets. But if you feed a direct fed microbial, research driven, to cows on milk and calves on milk replacer, I bet you see two things. Starter intake sooner and fewer health disorders in the calf. Wow. Take a hard look at that one as well. There are going to be more of these coming on the marketplace. The meeting back in Florida, some of you were there. I know you were there. There were maybe about a dozen papers on these products. They're coming at you really, really fast. And a lot of your AI studs sell them. So they're coming from different sources as well. And if you look at the list, there are some 27 different organisms that you could find in some of these products if you looked at them all. Just amazing, just amazing. And then the feed enzymes. Going to be interesting. You're going to see feed enzymes coming at you, especially in some of your silage inoculants, because the enzyme is going to do something to enhance the fermentation on those structures. With that, we are 1 minute late. We're going to stop and see if we have any questions or arguments on something I said or didn't say. And you're kind of stuck here until it stops raining. I can see that right now. Boy, what a great crowd we have here. Thank you for coming. I tell you, I'm getting paid on the number of people who walk in the tent, and I tell you, I just got filthy rich. I tell you that multi-million is really going to cost them some money.